People who forgave their cheating partner. What was the reason you let it go? A bit beside the question, but I wanted to tell a happier story. My mom cheated on her partner at the time D and became pregnant. D knew she cheated instantly because he couldn't physically have kids. He left her, but Mom didn't want grandparents to know I was a cheater baby. So D agreed to be put on the birth certificate. He came to pick me up and spend time with me every Sunday. He took up the role of dad even though I wasn't his. I found out a lot later all this, and I am still so thankful he stayed in my life. D didn't forgive my mom for cheating, but held no grudge or hostility towards the product of the cheating. Love you, Dad. She was an emotional wreck over it. And it seemed like she was genuinely remorseful and deeply regretted what she did. And she promised that she wouldn't do it again. After all, why get so hung up on a mistake if it's never committed again? And then she cheated on me with someone else. Edit. Regretted, not re-rated. I thought that if I left her then I'd be alone forever. 3 years after leaving her, and that turned out to not be true, and I also learned that being single is much better than being in a shitty relationship. Time. And karma. She left me for another guy because they were soulmates and were meant to be together, and a bunch of other excuses she gave me. We got divorced so that she could be with him, and then, shocker, the romance of the century didn't work out. She moved on to another guy. We'll call him Dave because his name was Dave. And he seemed decent enough. His parents were very good to our daughter. And my ex and him got engaged. Then one night, I got a call. On the other end of the phone was my ex. Crying so hard she was barely able to form words. But eventually she said something like, "I'm so sorry. Because I finally know what I put you through." Turns out Dave had met his soulmate. And had been carrying on an affair. They were meant to be together. And my ex heard all the excuses she gave to me repeated back to her, in some cases word for word. Through her tears, she apologized profusely. And it would have been so easy for me to say, "Serves you right," and hang up the phone. I didn't do that. It had been about 7 years since we split up. I'd moved on. Water under the bridge and all that shit. Plus we still had the kid together. So I talked her down off the ledge. Told her that she was strong enough to get through this, true. And accepted her apology. Years later we reconnected for our daughter's wedding. All is forgiven. And we're okay now. I'm a sucker for crying. 1 year into our relationship she confessed in tears that she cheated on me 2 weeks into our relationship by having sex with her ex. I forgave her and was proud of her for being honest. 2 months prior to our wedding and I find out she's been screwing her boss. I was an idiot. I forgave her after leaving. Not me but a friend. He didn't want to be single again and go through the dating process. So he forgave. She cheated couple of times more and he still forgave. Ended up married. I stopped keeping up with the story because it's always the same cheating shit again. Because I was trying to understand why it is she made that decision. And I wanted to try and make the marriage work. My mistake. It had been like 7 years. He cheated. We broke up. Moved on completely. No contact. He comes back. I'm the one that got away, etc., etc. No one is the same person at 30 that they are at 20, at least I hope not. I gave it a shot and now we've been married 5 years, together for 10. And it's bliss. Ideally. People grow and change. He cried in front of me and seemed actually sorry. 10 minutes later he tried to kiss, touch me because he felt like we needed to have sex. My ex-fiancé lied to me about this emotional affair he was having behind my back for 5 to 6 years. Some girl he met online gaming. Always wondered why he didn't want me to play that particular game with him. I wasn't controlling and he's allowed to have friends. And play video games at night, etc. I trusted him. But I shouldn't have. He wanted us to move to California suddenly. But my mom was diagnosed with cancer so I stayed back home. She only had a few months. He moved there without me. Planning on setting up and me moving there in the future. The day my mom died he told me about the affair and all that went on for years. The emotional affair became physical and he was sorry he couldn't be there for me when my mom passed. It was unbearable pain. My mom treated him like her future son-in-law and died thinking we were going to get married. Last words she said to him, she loved him like a son and she was happy for us, etc. Months later he comes back and is as sorry for what he did, etc. Turns out this woman had been ironically lying to him for years about who she is. What she looked like. Her age. her financial situation, and that she is married and has 4 kids. Idiot. Because I couldn't do math. We were dating for 2 months. But things got serious pretty fast. Met each other's families. This was around the holidays, and we're having the talks about where we saw things going. One weekend, I come down with a really bad flu. Couldn't move out of bed. And told her I could not see her, but would be happy to talk on the phone. She tells me, "Hey, if it's all the same, do you mind if I pick up another shift at the piano bar, waitressing, and make some money for the night?" I tell her, "Sure. I'd rather rest and try to kick this bug. Go for it." 3 months later, we're sitting on my couch and she seems distant. She tells me we need to talk. Starts crying and tells me she thinks she has an STD. She tells me the night she picked up that extra shift at the bar, she stayed until closing and fucked her married boss in his car. But, and here's the kicker, she tells me, "You and I had only been on a couple of dates up to that point and weren't exclusive. So it wasn't like she was cheating on me." In her mind. For some reason, I couldn't put the math together to figure out which weekend it was that she took that extra shift. So I dismissed it. It wasn't until months later that the math hit me like an epiphany, and by that time, we had developed so much more as a couple that I figured it was a one-off indiscretion. P.S. She didn't have an STD. She had a yeast infection. In the end, I called things off. She was a pretty terrible person in the end, and may have cheated on me at least 2 more times by the time things were over. I wasted 3.5 years of my life with her. But I never married her or had kids with her. Which would have been way worse. He was a bartender. And if you must know, he didn't even come inside her. I believed her when she said she regretted it and would never do it again. 17 years later, I haven't regretted that decision and we are still together. Because life with her was better than life without her. And because our marriage counselor recognized that we still loved each other. That was 36 years ago. We're still married. And still love each other. I was pregnant with my 2nd child and terrified of doing it alone. I didn't think I was capable. I was also beaten down enough to feel like I'd never have anything better. Thankfully I wised up. It's been years now and I'm still single and may be that way for the rest of my days, but it doesn't scare me like it did. I'm happy and that's all that really matters. My cripplingly low self-esteem. Not me. But my mother's boyfriend, not my dad, cheated on her when she was pregnant with his child. I hated his guts. She still took him back. He was an alcoholic and I always thought he was a weak, pathetic man. I couldn't believe why she wanted him ever back. So I asked her. The explanation she gave was that although he cheated on her, she wasn't a great partner to him either. She told me she would always belittle him and be emotionally abusive to him. They somehow reconciled and stayed together for another 14 years. Till he suddenly died of a heart attack at 45. That was 15 years ago. My mother never dated someone again. She went nudes to another guy early in our relationship. I forgave her just because it was early and she just sent nudes, so I decided to believe her when she said it was a mistake and wouldn't happen again. Then a year later made a Tinder behind my back and was flirting and sending nudes to more than a dozen guys. I forgave my cheating partner. But it was also the reason we got divorced. You can forgive someone and still not want to be with them anymore. I feel like there's 2 kinds of cheaters. Ones that will always be cheaters. And people who feel immense guilt about it and never do it again. Though the first one seems to be more common. He shouted we were on a break on a regular basis. I slept with an ex-fuck buddy the night before they did. My girl calls me just bawling. She confessed immediately after it happened. We were long distance, so it was hard for both of us in the ways of intimacy. Guess we are more alike than we ever imagined. She was like, "I made a mistake." I was like, well, funny thing. Yeah. That conversation didn't go well. I did. And then found out she did it again. And I realized I had twat written on my forehead in invisible ink. She did it with Henry Cavill. I was more jealous than mad. Edit. Guys, it was a joke. Chill the fuck out, lol. I would never allow my girlfriend to get fucked by Henry Cavill. Before I had a chance with him, of course. First wife cheated at work, I let it go because I was in love, then she did it again. Second wife cheated when I was at work. I let it go because we had children together. She did it again. I forgive her again because I'm an idiot. Then she started an affair online all the time thinking correctly that I was an idiot. Eventually we agreed it could not continue as it was. I then fell for and married our babysitter who was introduced to me by wife number 2. Now married and have been for 16 years. No affairs. No dramas, just happiness. Third time's a charm. She's bipolar and an alcoholic. She's a deeply flawed person and I have forgiven her. We were together 10 years and married. Owned a home. All came crashing down Christmas Eve a few years ago. I divorced her but she remains in my life as a friend. I take her calls and help when she asks. She tore me apart emotionally. But once I came to terms and saw her clearly, it just made me sad. She's a wreck. She's currently in jail for her 3rd DUI. And her new boyfriend had beat the shit out of her before her crash. Reading this thread. A week after finding out my wife's been cheating on me for months. Some of it is hard to read. The number of times people cheat again is staggering and has really dampened my desire to forgive her. We're trying, since we have 2 young kids and after 15 years. This is the first crisis we've ever had. I want to forgive her and not feel so fucking sad all of the time. But I honestly don't know how people do it. Edit 1. This received more feedback than I expected. With a roughly 75-25 split on what to do. Thank you for your comments. I've read them all and they've all been helpful. Context is obviously key, so I can try to provide more of it. I'm normally the dickhead. The one who goes to the gym. Plays golf. Goes drinking and watching rugby with friends. I have a good group of family and friends. Which I share with her. I game when I come home from work. I'm doing a master's degree in engineering part-time, balanced around everything else, ironically to better provide for my family. I had a very happy life. From my pa. I half-heartedly do the housework and make every excuse not to do it. Waiting for her to inevitably pick up my slack. I love my kids and we spend quality time together. We play and laugh. Game and watch movies together, but it's always on my terms. I have a relatively easy job, but it can be stressful and I find my own ways of managing that outside of the family. I often have conversations with my wife where I just dump all my work issues onto her to listen to. It makes me feel better but maybe adds to her shit. I like to drink but never to excess, nor do I get abusive, violent with it. I'm English. It's a large part of my culture. I've always made a point of spending at least an hour together each night. Usually to watch an episode of a series or a movie. She often spends that time on her phone or falls asleep. Probably to do with how busy she has been picking up after me and the kids. I tend to focus on what I'm watching but will sit on my phone for an hour or so afterwards before going to bed. We were intimate often. Way more than average, I would say. And this didn't change whilst she was cheating. She is an absolute fucking diamond. She's way more attractive than me. And leagues nicer as a person. She isn't high maintenance or crazy. She doesn't get angry or give me shit for when I get away with the things I have been doing for years. I've never followed through with cheating. Never formed an emotional bond with another woman, but have been in a position of having a half-naked woman in my hotel room bed that I had to look in the eye and tell her that this couldn't happen. I'm married. This was a very strange situation that led to this. And there was no kissing or physical contact up to this point. I lived with the guilt of being in that position for 8 years and was so disgusted in myself that I vowed never to get into a position where I had to say no in the first place. Just avoid going down that path at all costs. The temptation can be too high. We've been together for 15 years like I said. I'm her first lover. I had a few flings and relationships before we met as I'm a couple of years older. I guess things had gotten stale. Not in the bedroom but probably emotionally. Too much time just cruising through life. Too much time on our phones. We were both blind to the state we were in. I'm fiery. I'm impulsive and loud. Sharp-tongued. Quick-witted and can be nasty. If something winds me up I'll lash out with some curses and horrible phrases. I'm in the military. So calling someone a fucking cunt for not putting milk in my tea for me is completely normal and never balked at. She isn't. She works in a school and that sort of language is completely jarring to her. Sometimes I use that language on her. Ashamedly. I do it on purpose to shock her, hurt her. Sometimes I say those things without even realizing or meaning to be so crude. I don't ever mean anything too sinister by it. It just comes out. I have a flash of anger about something. And I forget about it. She doesn't. And these words linger and fester with her. Then along comes this man. My daughter's primary school teacher, who works at the school with my wife. He comments on how good she is doing at work, how great she is at her job. They go to work socials together and get talking. Through group messages they begin to message directly. It's all just conversation initially. But on other group socials it leads to flirting, which leads to complimenting her appearance and she his. They start getting sexual, talking about what they want to do to each other. Physically, showing signs of intent and want. Whilst she is getting these messages, she's doing the housework whilst her husband is gaming and the kids are bouncing off the walls. When her husband lashes out about something she has or hasn't done, she gets a message telling her how great she is, or how much this man wants to fuck her. I began noticing something was up. A few weeks back, we are usually very open with our phones, knowing each other's codes. I noticed that she changed her passcode and got a bit suspicious. I felt bad about going through her messages so I didn't. But it was tempting and I knew something wasn't right with it. She messages friends a lot so I didn't feel weird about it. I confronted her about it. Semi-humorous. And she dismissed it. One night she goes out with a friend to a pub. I fall asleep on the sofa. I open my eyes to see her messaging a man. A glimpse of some of the messages were far too intimate for that of a colleague. Even though I recognized the name, my heart started pounding but she didn't know I saw. She left the room and I started to panic. I messaged from downstairs telling her that I needed to see her phone immediately. She came down a few minutes later and handed it over. I couldn't find anything. I searched for the man's name that I saw seconds beforehand and there was nothing, but I noticed that it was blocked. Over the next few hours she came clean. It led from him being drunk and out and was saying things he shouldn't, to the fact they've been messaging for weeks and that it had been flirtatious to then it was sexual. She deleted and blocked him so I couldn't read the messages. Over the past week she's told me the worst of what they said. Explicitly sexual and showing intent. I'm due to be deployed in 2 months and will be away for 4 months. So I'm grateful to have discovered this now, before allowing it to lead to something whilst I was away, which I have no doubt it would have. We didn't sleep that night. I was angry and heartbroken. I asked her to leave and she took the kids away for a few days whilst I processed. I got some support through professionals at work and was able to get over the anger enough to see I still love her. She swears it was never physical. No sex or kissing or touching. Just messages. But it's this emotional bond she formed with another man that hurts. I couldn't forgive a physical affair. I'm not sure how people do. The only saving grace in this is that it wasn't physical. But the emotional betrayal is painful enough. I asked her back to speak after we'd both seen a professional. I asked her to stay for dinner and eventually overnight. Without the kids. We had a great night of talking and connecting. Realizing how far we've drifted from how we should be. We were both determined to change. She made the mistake but I don't seem to blame her for it. It was years of me pushing her to do something. And this is what it was. I honestly feel as though we can make this work. And I feel the relationship deserves that we really try. I have relationship counseling sessions booked in the upcoming weeks. And we talk a lot. I spend most of my time now doing the housework. With no gaming. My degree has taken a hit since I can't focus on it ATM. I keep busy and keep the house tidy. I realize that I need to change and she is genuinely remorseful and devastated by what she's done. But I often go in cycles of anger, hate, sadness which leads to seeking comfort from her to then feeling better. Only to go through the cycle again. And that's how it's been for a few days. Moments of being okay followed by long periods of time being angry and sad. I haven't forgiven her yet and I'm trying to see what I can do to stall my deployment to give us time to resolve this. If it's possible. I haven't decided either way what's going to happen. But I know that I want to forgive. She isn't completely due blame. Even though she's the one that chose to do this. She's sad about the whole thing but I appreciate that's due to her getting caught. She was happy doing it beforehand. I don't believe I'll ever trust her completely ever again. And living in this cycle is difficult. How long we can both put up with it, who knows? If we're both determined to get through it though. Hopefully we will. There is no second chance. Anything even close to this happening again will be the end. If the kids were older, perhaps I'd make the decision to move on. We don't have a lot on common in terms of hobbies or what we want in life. But there is definitely love there. She just had time to feel like a woman again. Not a mother and a wife. I'll give her that. This time. Sorry for ramble. But this has been nice to write down and share. She said it was because she hadn't slept with anyone else before. So it was a one-time thing. Spoiler. It was not a one-time thing. In hindsight, it was pretty easy to forgive. I divorced her, moved 2,000 miles away and never spoke to her again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.